Welcome everybody to this week's Higher Education User Group. The user group, of course, is supported by Salesforce.com's user group initiative and their community team. We call this weekly meeting our Getting to Know the Community effort. And generally what we try to do is introduce the community to solutions that may help us in using Salesforce more effectively and efficiently. My name is Kathy Lukeman. I work at Maryville University. I am the user group leader and a proud member of the Higher Education Advisory Council. The user group is an initiative of the Advisory Council. Today's meeting, we're going to get to know CheckForce.
This is Ito Meros from Check21. I'm the solutions consultant, and I'll be talking through most of the demo today, most of the CheckForce demo that you'll see on your screen. So before we begin the demonstration of the CheckForce solution, it's important to note that CheckForce today supports a few different platforms. It does support the CauseView nonprofit platform. It does support Linvio, and by the end of this month, we'll support also Salesforce's NPSP platform. CheckForce is a check scanning solution that is native to Salesforce. It is not just a check scanning solution, but also an account receivable automation solution. Everything that you see within the CheckForce UI can be customized. So if there are any missing options, missing functions, all of those options or functions can be added to further streamline your business, your organization, your workflows. So today we're going to begin by scanning a variety of different checks that have different gifting options. We're going to be scanning actually a total of 3 checks into the CheckForce UI. The CheckForce solution itself, just as an FYI, does support the majority of check scanning devices, check scanning manufacturers, and models. So regardless of what check scanning device you may already have, we may already support it, and most likely in all instances do support it. At this point, I think we're just going to start the demo, and we can take questions either in between or at the end of the call. Chris, if you can, let's click on the Scan Checks button. So at this point, the CheckForce solution that lives, again, inside of Salesforce is calling on the check scanner that we're utilizing. And we are utilizing a digital check scanner at our location. Within the screen itself, you'll notice a few things. On the left-hand side, top left-hand side, there is a check summary. So it basically gives you a summary of the check row that you've currently selected. And on the right-hand side, there is a zoom window. So we're able to zoom onto the check. If we have donor forms, or if we were scanning donor forms, we would be able to see the donor forms as well. We do support a variety of different templating options. So we can use donor forms that have barcodes or donor forms that have microlines, so we can further streamline the matching process, meaning we match to constituents or match to mail package IDs or campaigns, and even as far as opportunities inside of your system. We are using a check scanner. That's one of the questions. The check scanner that we are using is a digital check scanner. But again, we support a variety of different scanners, digital check, Panini, even the adaptive scanners, which are full page document scanners. And one of the reasons is that a lot of the donation forms come in 8.5 by 11. So we are able to extract barcodes or microlines off of those types of donor forms, and obviously link them to the checks that are being scanned in sequence. So below we'll see the check grid. That is where we're going to find all of the checks which have been scanned. You'll notice that CheckForce has already determined whose check or who the constituent is that check that has been scanned applies to. And the way we do that is twofold. One, if we're using a donation form, if we've scanned a donation form, that constituent ID may be found in a barcode or in a microline. If we're not using a donation form, we actually use check history or check account history to determine who the constituent may be. And what I mean by that is we basically use the account number and the routing number as a unique ID to determine who that constituent may be. So if that constituent has provided us with a check in the past, we can automatically detect that constituent in the future and automatically match them within the UI itself. So the next column is going to be the solicitation. So that's where we're going to find our campaigns, our appeals, and in most instances, again, if we're using donation forms, mail package IDs are going to be tied in to campaigns or appeals, or we can just use those campaigns or appeals directly. To the right of that particular column is our gifting option, our allocations in essence. So we have the ability to, in that drop down, to select from the creation of one-time gifts, the creation of pledges. We also have the ability to select open opportunities or open payments, in essence, scheduled payments that exist inside of the Salesforce environment. In this particular case, in this particular example, there was a check for $300, and because there's only one open opportunity or open payment for $200, the CheckForce UI or the CheckForce solution itself created two different allocations. So in essence, it created a split, and the first allocation to that check is to that opportunity. So we've taken $200 out of that $300 check and allocated to that open opportunity or open pledge, in essence, inside of the Salesforce. So inside of the Salesforce system, the remaining balance, the $100 of the $300 check, is actually going to be allocated automatically to a one-time gift. And we do this by default, but we do allow the user to make changes. So if the user wanted to create a pledge or create an accounting pledge, we can, or the user can, change those allocation types. To the right of the column, of that column, you'll find the allocation amount. So how much of that check we're allocating to the gifting type. The allocation, we do have a question from Kathy. Is the allocation pick list customizable? Absolutely. Everything that you see within the CheckForce UI is customizable. Everything can be changed to tailor your business and to tailor your workflows. To the right of the allocation amounts, we find the designations. So you may have a variety of different funds. For instance, if you're a higher ed client, you may have a soccer fund or a football fund or a building fund. You may be able to select from those funds inside of the dropdown, or if you already have those designations set up under the opportunities, CheckForce will actually pre-populate that dropdown with the designation or the fund that's associated with the opportunity. And then to the right of that column, we have plus and minus signs. Those plus and minus signs are splits. So we can continuously split or continuously create different allocations for that check. So if we press the plus sign, you can see that now we can select from a different gifting option. So if we wanted to do a one-time gift to one fund and another one-time gift to another fund, we definitely have the option to do that. So we can split checks as much as we'd like. Okay, so we're going to remove that on this example. And then to the right of that column, we have a variety of different columns, all which relate to the check. And if we're familiar with typical remote deposit capture solutions, you'll notice that it's very much the same. You have the ability to view the routing number, view the account number and the amount that has been allocated, as well as the check number. If for some reason any of that information was extracted incorrectly, then we have, as the user, the ability to change it. So we can click on the check number, for instance, and we can change the check number if for some reason that information was extracted incorrectly. A couple of things to remember. Our system is probably a little bit more accurate than typical remote deposit capture solutions, only because we not only use the microline that's provided to us by the check scanning device, but we do have an OCR system that confirms that that microline is in essence correct. So typically our accuracy rate is close to 100% when we're pulling the routing number, account number, amount, and check number. To the right of the check number field is our validation engine. So it tells us whether the check is valid or not, whether the allocations are valid, whether there are any duplications. We customize this in almost all cases for our clients. For the majority of our clients, each of them have different validation rules that they'd like us to build into the CheckForce solution. So just as an FYI, keep that in mind. We can absolutely create different validations in the CheckForce UI itself. And then,
so can I interrupt for just a second?
Sure.
Can you give us an example of what that validation may be?
Sure. So if for some reason the allocation amount was greater than the payment amount, we wouldn't let you close a batch. If for some reason the allocation amount was less than a check amount, we wouldn't let you close a batch. There are a variety of different validation rules. Also, check duplication. Has this check been scanned in the past? That is also a validation rule of ours. So there's just a slew of different validation rules that we have as out of the box validations, and then we have validation rules that are supplied to us by our clients.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Absolutely. So as we move on to the second row or the second check that's been scanned, we weren't able to detect or the CheckForce solution wasn't able to detect who that constituent was. So we're going to begin to type the constituent's name, and in this case, the constituent is actually Willow Williams, and we're actually going to be able to see that. So Chris, can you click on the number 2 button, please? So just as an FYI, as we click on the number 2, again, we're going to see that image to the right. And if you notice before, as Chris was typing in that none field, in that null field, it is an autocomplete. So we can pick up information from your Salesforce environment and read that back to you. So as you type, you begin to see all of the names that match your request. Again, to the right of Willow Williams is the solicitation. In this particular case, she was unsolicited. So we have, in essence, what is an unsolicited campaign or a default campaign in this particular environment. And we're going to obviously select that. And then we're going to create a pledge in this particular scenario. So we're going to click on create a pledge, and you'll see that now there's an allocation amount to the right of the create a pledge dropdown, but there's also a pledge amount to the right of that. So in this particular case, we're going to create a pledge for $2,000, but we have a check for $1,500. So we're basically fulfilling $1,500 of that $2,000 pledge. And in this particular scenario or in this environment, our unsolicited campaigns have a corresponding fund, and we call it the LS fund. So we're going to just select from that fund, and we're going to just make sure, obviously, that everything is validated, everything is okay. So I'm going to
interrupt one more time, and
sure.
At least on that line.
Sure.
When you're creating a pledge, is that associated with CheckForce itself, or are you talking about creating an opportunity that is a pledge record type?
That's exactly what we're doing. So every environment is different, but in this particular environment, we're doing a few things. We're creating an opportunity that is a pledge, and then we're creating two payments. The first payment is a $1,500 completed payment, and the second payment is going to be the balance of the pledge to the payment. So the $500 is going to be a scheduled payment that remains in the system. And again, every environment may be different, but in this particular environment, that's what we're doing on the back end. We're creating an opportunity with two payments, one which is completed and one which is scheduled.
I'm assuming when we were to customize this, we could set up our own process. So if that scheduled payment wouldn't be due, let's say, for a month or 6 months, or by the end of the fiscal year, we would be able to set that with the correct date. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So if you needed us to place a scheduled date inside of the UI, we can, or if you wanted us to, by default, assign a certain date for every pledge that is created, we can do that as well. In this particular environment, when we create that scheduled payment, we leave that scheduled payment with a null date. So there's no date that's associated with that scheduled payment.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now we're going to move to the third case. In the third case, we have Martina Martin, or Martin Martina actually, and we're going to do 3 different allocations for Martin. So we're going to click on the create a one-time gift, and then we're going to do a split, and we're going to create another one-time gift for another $100. And then before we create another split for the remaining balance, I just want us to go to the right-hand side and hover over that validation. And you'll see that again, there are different validations. So in this particular instance, it's saying that all of the check allocation amounts must be greater than 0. So we have a $0 amount in this particular situation. So we're going to obviously change that. So we're going to go back to, again, create a one-time gift. And the reason that we're doing this is we may have different funds that we want to associate each one-time gift with, or each allocation with. So just as an FYI, that functionality is available for us. Okay. And any questions so far about what we've seen on in these particular examples?
I have a quick question about the fund. Is that also a lookup, say, to our GAUs, or is that something that we have to manually maintain as part of CheckForce?
Sure. So in this particular case, it's a dropdown, not an autocomplete. We can change it to an autocomplete if you have a lot of active funds or a lot of general units. We can, again, customize the environment to tailor your needs. In this particular environment, there aren't going to be a lot of active funds, and that's why it was requested that we create a drop down as opposed to an autocomplete.
Nice to know that you have that option.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as an FYI, remember, for the most part, if there's a donation form that's being scanned and that barcode is extracted appropriately, then we can pre-populate the majority of this information for you, including the fund, including the mail package IDs, the campaigns, the appeals, and obviously the gifting options.
So are you saying that were this check to arrive, say, with a fundraising coupon, right, that they could be associated together? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in essence, for the most part, when there's, at least for a lot of our clients, each mail package ID has a certain fund that's associated with it. So we would pre-populate a lot of the information that you see in the UI itself. So we would, in essence, based on the donation form, select the constituent, select the campaign or appeal, and then obviously select the fund as well. So we would do a lot of the work for you. Obviously, you can then change it if you believe that it's wrong for any reason. You can then change the allocations or change any of the information that you see on the UI. But a lot of that information is going to be pre-populated for you.
That's awesome.
Okay.
So before you move from this, what would happen if I didn't save and I started scanning checks again?
Oh, you can absolutely do that. You can absolutely continue to add additional checks to the UI. So actually, I think we can scan one more check for you, and then we'll also show you the deletion of that check. So Chris, if you can grab a check, we'll just show you that we can scan that check into this batch. Okay, and there you go. So we've added an additional check to a batch. And just as an FYI, even afterwards, meaning if we didn't save and close, if a batch is open, we can always add additional checks to the batch in the future. Okay, so we're gonna hit the delete button just to show you that we can remove checks if we needed to. And at this point, I think we can actually save and close this particular batch. And as we save and close the batch, this is a batch closure confirmation window. And if you're using remote deposit capture solutions, in almost every remote deposit capture solution, there is this particular functionality just to confirm that the checks that you've scanned match both the amounts and the counts that are showing within the check grid. Okay. Any questions so far before we proceed?
No, I'm ready to dig in. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Perfect. So let's hit confirm and close. And then what we're going to do next is actually show you really quick the load open batch. So we have a batch that we've previously saved in the past, but we haven't closed. So just as an FYI, we can click on that particular batch, and then we have the check that was scanned in the past. And this is typically like very useful if, for instance, you're going to lunch, maybe you've scanned a batch of 50 checks and you just haven't completed the batch yet. So just as an FYI, just like in typical remote deposit capture solutions, that particular functionality does exist for you. Okay, perfect. So I'd like to show you the back end. So what gets created after a batch is closed or saved. But I'll take a break for a second now, just in case there are any questions about what you've seen on the user interface itself.
I tend to be the one who asks the most questions, but I'll encourage folks who have logged in to feel free to unmute and ask questions as well.
So Kathy, did you have
my question? I was going to say, let's get into Salesforce and see what it looks like.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're going to click on the batch which we just created, which was batch number 48. So batches and checks and check assignments are all they are all part of our managed package. So these are all custom objects which are going to exist inside of your environment. So in this particular instance, you see that we had a total of 3 checks. Those 3 checks totaled $2,100. And within that related list on the bottom, we see each one of the checks that were scanned, the accounts that they were attributed to, and the solicitations that corresponded to those particular checks. So we're going to click on one of those check items, check number 82. And there's a few things here that that are important to note. One is this is a sandbox environment. So anything that you see where there's an account number or a microline is actually going to use Salesforce encryption. So you're not going to see this in your production environments. But just as an FYI, that information is going to be available to us inside of Salesforce. And the reason that we capture this information inside of Salesforce is upon batch closure, these checks are actually sent to our payment gateway, which in essence will then transmit to our client's financial institution. So we work strictly as a pipeline between a client and their financial institution. We are not a processor. We are not an aggregator. All funds are settled directly at your bank so that you could take advantage from same day or next day funding. Okay. As we move further down the screen, we'll see that there are check assignments. Actually, before we talk about check assignments, there is the ability to see all of the images. So we do capture the check image, both the front and back in TIFF format, and the front in JPEG format. And the reason that we differentiate between those two formats is a TIFF image is required when we're sending checks to the financial institution, and a JPEG is required when we have to show the check image on the user interface. If we were scanning donor forms inside of the CheckForce UI, that donor form would also be saved into your Salesforce environment. One of the customizations or one of the custom settings of CheckForce is the ability for the Salesforce or the organization administrator to select between saving files or in essence images to notes and attachments, or saving them to files. So just as an FYI, in this particular environment, we're saving them to notes and attachments, but the organizational administrator can change that if they so desire.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. At this point, we're going to move to check assignments. Again, check assignments is a custom object, and that's in essence our allocation. So our ability to select different gifting options for one check inside of the user interface. So in the user interface, if you remember correctly, for Sandra Sanders, we actually created two different allocations. The first allocation was to a scheduled payment, and the second allocation was a one-time gift for $100. So if we click on the check assignment itself, or actually, well, let's go to the payment. If we click on the payment itself, we'll see that in this particular in this particular environment, we've actually completed. We've changed the status to completed. So at one point in time, this was a scheduled payment, and at this point, we've actually completed the entire payment by taking in that check. If we go back, so if we scroll back to the previous screen. And we click on the second payment that was created, this is going to be a one-time payment or a one-time gift, and it is a completed check as well.
So for me to understand what you're saying here, I'm sure this is significant. Are you saying that it's automatically set to completed when we're receiving, let's say, a payment for which there is no associated opportunity or campaign?
Absolutely.
So we can manually set it, and we can set it to automatically save at a certain status. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. So in this particular environment, when we have a one-time gift, what we do is we don't create an opportunity, we create only a payment. And that payment is obviously attributed to that constituent, and it is a completed payment for $100, which is of payment type check or money order. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. And then if we go back, actually, a couple of steps back, we're going to go back to the list of checks. And we're going to click on Willa Williams, and I'm going to show you what happens when there is a pledge payment. So we're going to scroll all the way down. And in this particular environment, remember, we created a pledge payment. So we're going to click on the Williams Willa household opportunity. And we're going to show you that we have here an opportunity of $2,000, right? So that was the pledge amount. At this point, we've made a payment of $1,500, which was the check amount, which leaves us with a balance of $500, okay? And if we go down to the payment, so if we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see that there's both a payment that is scheduled and a payment which is completed. So the payment which is completed is our check allocation amount. So we took that income in, and we have another payment which we created for $500, which was the balance of the two. And that has a status of scheduled. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I do have a question. When that payment comes in, since there's no opportunity created, can I assume that it would automatically find and associate this scheduled payment?
Yeah, so this what we did is we actually, because this is a new pledge in the CheckForce UI, we actually created this pledge, and this pledge is a new opportunity. So we just created this opportunity in the CheckForce UI, and then we created those two additional payment records that correspond to this opportunity.
Apologies, you did say that. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. And now we're going to take one step back, and we're going to talk a little bit about, in essence, the funding process. So at the very end of the day, we're going to take all of this information, all of these check images and the check data that is associated with them, meaning the amounts, and we're going to send that information to, again, the Check 21 payment gateway. And then the Check 21 payment gateway is going to send that check or those variety of checks to the client's financial institution for deposit. But we go a step further than that, and we also pick up check returns from that financial institution. So if for some reason any of these checks that you've taken in come back returned for non-sufficient funds, for account closed, for invalid account, for whatever the return reason may be, up above in the right-hand corner, you'll see that there's a C21 return date and C21 return reason. We actually sync that data back into the Salesforce environment so that you're aware that a check has come back returned. We don't take any action on that information, and the only reason we don't do that is because it seems that every client we have has a different workflow for check returns. But again, we do sync that information in so that you can take action once that return information is available to you. So you may decide that you may want to do a second attempt on a check that's returned non-sufficient funds as opposed to a check that's come back for a hard return like an account closed. So just as an FYI, again, this is an end-to-end solution. So not only do we transmit your checks to your financial institution, but we pick up the returns from the financial institution as well.
That's very cool, but I do have a question about that.
Sure.
So you document the date and reason if it were returned, and say we wanted to process it again, second time, if it were NSF. Would the process document what we've done, or is it just updating a date associated with the record that already exists?
So that's a good question. So you'd have to actually create a workflow that resubmits this particular record to us. And in essence, what would happen is you almost have like a duplication of this particular record with different transaction IDs. It becomes very complex depending, again, on what it is that you want to do with those returns.
Sure. Thanks for explaining that.
Absolutely. Any other questions about this particular solution? Okay. Kathy, do you want us to also demo the Scanimation solution, which is also used by some of our higher ed clients?
Yeah, I would love that. I will encourage folks to ask questions about this, but yeah, if you want to switch over to Scanimation, that'd be awesome.
Okay, so Chris is going to pause the screen for a couple of minutes, and in that in-between time, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll answer them accordingly.
Yeah, and if you can give us some background on what Scanimation is, that would be helpful as Chris is switching over.
Absolutely. So Scanimation is a native document scanning solution that lives inside of the Salesforce environment. It is a completely customizable solution as well, but out of the box, it has several different functions, most of which allows you to, in essence, scan documents into your Salesforce environment and then save those save pages or segments of those documents to different records inside of your Salesforce environment. So as opposed to using some sort of external solution, and then saving those documents to your desktop and then importing them into Salesforce, which may be a lengthy process, you can do everything inside of your Salesforce environment seamlessly. So I do see a question here, Kathy, from Carrie. And Carrie is wondering if clients using this for anything related to tuition payments or scholarship checks. Can you give a couple of examples? We don't have any customers at this point that are using it for tuition payments or scholarship checks. But again, CheckForce is a completely customizable solution, and it can be customized for those particular purposes. We do have a lot of clients that use them for invoicing. We, for instance, have an accounting seed version of this particular solution. So if there were some sort of record that we had to read from and write to inside of your Salesforce environment, we can absolutely do that for you. It doesn't have to be strictly for nonprofit purposes.
That was a good question because we do get checks for lots of different things, tuition and fees and you know, events, all kinds of things. And the fact, I think I heard you say, you don't necessarily have to have an opportunity or a campaign, that you can identify a record that's associated with the need for a payment, like an invoice or something like that, and you'd still be able to leverage the system to apply that payment. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we do have some public sector organizations, states that have invoices or some sort of bills that they associated checks to, and we definitely give them the ability to do that. So again, you know, what you see today is in essence out of the box for nonprofits. But if you had different workflows or different purposes where you were collecting checks, we can definitely streamline the process for you inside of your Salesforce environment.
Hallelujah, that sounds awesome. So I know we're like 1 minute from the top of the hour, or probably less. So I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to all three of you for this awesome presentation today. I will let our participants know that I will convert the recording and get it into our private chatter group just as soon as I can, and remind you that we will have Venkat Reddy present to us on Yale's implementation next week, and we are canceled for the holiday, for the July 4th holiday the following week. So thanks everybody. I will get the recording process just as soon as I can, and we'll talk to you next week. Appreciate it. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.